say, and then what would happen? Right back to their old ways. Pharaoh would harden his heart, and they would go right back to their old ways. All we've gone through in this chapter 16 just indicates that there are going to be some that will never, ever accept God. Even though they see now they're cursing the plague, instead of repenting to the one that caused it, they just always blaming somebody. There's a couple of things that we want to point out. Verse 20, when it talks about every island fled away and the mountains were not found. If you'll go back to chapter 14, that same phrasing is used. Heaven departed as a scroll when it was rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. What you've got to look at in chapter 16, I believe, is when it talks about the earthquake, we're not talking about a physical activity. We're talking about symbolism here. And so something that great would seem like it shook the whole earth. If it shook the whole earth, then it would move things out of place. And when we look at Great Babylon, we're going to look at that more when we get to the next chapter that we're going into. But are there questions or comments about chapter 16? Brother Terry.
Just in verse 19, I guess, the phrase it says came in remembrance. I like to use this as a way to answer in Acts chapter 10. It says that Cornelius' prayer came up as a memorial. It wasn't God needing reminder or anything, but it was according to his plan. So it wasn't anything special just because Cornelius prayed. It was simply that it was now time for God's plan, just as in this case.
Right. Good point. And all through Scripture, everything is done either in the fullness of time or when God has planned it. Starting with chapter 17, it says, "And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying, Come unto me, come hither. I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters." When we're looking at chapter 17 and 18, it is sort of like it's going back and sort of covering things as a conclusion. It's reminding you of what it told you. So, and specifically, it's going to hone in on the Babylon and the harlot. If you also look at 17, when you look at waters, if you will look at verse 15, it's going to explain what waters are. And that's in chapter 17 and verse 15. It talks about the waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So the symbolism here where it uses water, we're talking about people and nations. And she sitteth on the water, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. Now we're talking about in the spiritual thing and symbolically and not physically here. And the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. A couple of weeks ago, I sort of picked on the Catholic Church, showing how that once the physical Rome had diminished and gone out of power, that the power was still at the head of Rome. And we're going to be looking at that again, and I'm only using it as an example. It is one example among many. Remember, when we look at Scripture, a lot of times there's types and shadows and types and antitypes, and things have multiple meanings. But I think if we use the Catholic Church, we can see very clearly what point I'm trying to make here. If we go back to verse 1 where it says, "Come hither," what does "come hither" mean to you? If I were to say, "Come hither," Joel, what would it mean?
Come close.
Come close? There are some who want to make that word mean hear and listen, not come. But if you want to stay consistent, if you look down at verse 3 says, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. So I personally believe that when John is writing here in chapter 1 where it says, come hither, the angel that talked to him is saying, come go with me, I'm going to show you and tell you what's going on here. Because he says, I will show thee the judgment, and then we continue on. And then in verse 3 where it says, so he carried me into the spirit, into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Where have we heard about a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns before? Back in chapter 13:1. And we went into a pretty fair explanation at that time what that beast was, and then the land beast. Now, by sitting on the beast, what would that symbolize? Now, this great big old sea beast is coming up out of the water, and it is all powerful, and even the earth beast got its power from the sea beast. So now this woman is sitting on that beast. So what does that represent, or what could that represent? So, power? Okay, her power or the beast's power? Okay.
She controls it.
That's where I was going. If you ride on a horse, which one is more powerful, you or the horse? The horse. But you riding on the horse, you control the horse, and you control the power of the horse most of the time. Andrew and I went riding on horses in Colorado once, and the horse they thought I should ride, there wasn't much control in that little beast.
In chapter 12, John is saying about the woman and going into the wilderness. He changed the figures here as far as what the wilderness is from chapter 12 to here.
I don't think he's changing what the wilderness is, but I think he's drawing a sharp contrast, because the woman that you're talking about was a righteous woman, and she was, so if you look at this woman and draw the parallels, this one is on the side of evil and the other one was on the side of good. So I think there's a contrast that's being drawn. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. 2 things. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 5. Daniel chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes and wives and concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. When you're looking at this, to the Jews, sacred vessels that they had captured out of the temple, and what did they do with them? They drank from them, but how did they drink? In what manner were they drinking? They were praising all the gods. Desecration. They desecrated. Okay, so how does that apply to what we're looking at here? The woman in scarlet, having the golden cup in her hand, with abominations, filthiness of her fornication. Symbolically the same thing. Now for just a moment, let's go back to chapters 2 and 3 as we start pulling a few items together here. John has written to the 7 churches. Now we're going to skip through here kind of rapidly to just point out some things, and then we'll continue from there. Unto the chapter 2, verse 1. Unto the angel of the church of Ephesus write. And then if you skip down to verse 4, nevertheless I have somewhat against thee, because thou hast left thy first love. Verse 8, the angel in Smyrna. Verse 9, I know thy works and tribulations and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Verse 12, Pergamus. Verses 14 and 15. But I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there then that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. So hast thou also them that hold the doctrine of the Nicolaitans, which I hate, which thing I hate. In 20, he's writing, in verse 18 to Thyatira, and in verse 20, notwithstanding I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. We'll look at chapter 3 and verse 1 to Sardis. Be watchful and strengthen the things which remain that are ready to die, for I have not found thy works perfect before God. Verse 14, Laodiceans. Verse 15, I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would that thou wert cold or hot. So the reason I brought us to this point on the 7 churches, John has written to them telling them that what we are about to cover, starting with this verse 5, the great harlot, the mother of harlots, those things were already taking place in John's time when he was writing, regardless of which date you think. He was writing to them telling them, these things are already here. The apostasy of the church had already started. I say that because it is my opinion when we get to chapter 5, or verse 5, and it says, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. I believe that we are talking about apostasy, church apostasy. There are many that want to look at this and make it apply to one location, one time period, like Rome or Babylon the city. But since we're in a book of symbols, and if you look at everything that's being said and everything that's going on, there has not been a time in recorded history from Jesus up where there has not been an element on the other side, the apostasy. I'm bringing up the Catholic Church for this reason. When Rome, the city or nation, fell, went into decay, was conquered in 476 AD, the Roman Catholic Church did not cease existence. It got stronger. As we go through this chapter here, we will see where government and beast operate together to a degree. And that's how the Catholic Church operated. If you look at from 476 until really the Restorationist movement starting in the 1600s, who told nations, who told kings what to do? Catholic Church. When we get down to another verse here where it starts talking, well, let's just look at it. Verse 6, And I saw a woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. I have tried my best over the years to do a lot of research in one area of this, talking about the Catholic Church. How many of you know of the Inquisition? What was the name of the Inquisition? That's one of them, but there was another one that was called the Holy Inquisition. That was formalized in 1174, and it was the Holy Inquisition by the Catholic Church standards. They're the ones that would hold court and try people for being heretics and all. If you remember much about your history in the 1300s, which astronomer was it that they found as a heretic? Thank you. She was thinking, I was going to let her answer, she was thinking hard and couldn't come up with it. Galileo. Do you realize that in 1965, Pope Paul VI changed the name of the Holy Inquisition, the Office of Inquisition, to the Office of Devotion to Faith. Office of Devotion to Faith, and it is still an office in the Catholic Church. Just a name change. Now, here's where I ran into difficulty over the years trying to do study on this particular area when it comes to blood of the saints. Who did the Catholic Church persecute? Who did they try as heretics?
Anyone who did not believe in the Catholic Church.
Anyone that did not believe the way they believed. All right? Do you know how many people were, well, by the way, out of that office came the torture elements that we know of as the rack, burning, they got that from Rome, but anyway, burning, a few other things. But I could not find a number that were killed. I would imagine that if they would kill people for that, and also they burned Tyndale and Huss in the 1600s for writing the Bible, I have found numbers as low as 1,200, and I have found numbers as high as 75 million. I don't have an opinion. I can't find anything, and I know records weren't kept good, but the low number would be those that favor the church, and high numbers might be those that had something against it. But I just can't imagine that in a period of over 1,200 years, there was only 1,200 people killed as heretics. That seems mighty low to me, but I'm not going to talk about it. But the Catholic Church definitely put people to death for their belief. They took over the persecution. Now, like I said, I'm using this as an example because you can go into other areas and find the same thing. Muslims put people to death today for it. It's an example. But it's not apostasy. The Muslims never believed in Christ. So if we're looking at, is the Catholic Church an apostate church? Yeah, that's why I'm going with that example. Brother Funk, Brother Jim.
Two things. One, from verse 6, when it closes with this word admiration, I think it's a poor choice as far as the word. Because usually we use that, we look upon something with faith, and it was just the amazement and marvel that he had as far as what, the second question, is there any reason why you think, I guess the speculation, why he chose the figure of a woman over that of a man?
My opinion is that he chose that because if you go back into the Old Testament and look at it, how often is they were called cities that were not faithful to God. They were harlots, and it was always referring to a woman as being the harlot or the unfaithful to God on the spiritual plane. So I think that might be the carryover there.
Especially if you look at Proverbs, it's always look at the woman who is the one.
Right.
Lord.
So if we go back to Jeremiah 57, Jeremiah chapter 51.
That's what I was fixing to ask you, because I might have reference to Jeremiah 51, so. And there's a lot of the same, not necessarily terminology, but the same genre of words that's used. So, is Isaiah predicting, with Isaiah predicting this is what's going to happen this far down the road?
Well, Isaiah was a prophet, and those things fall in line, just like, in my opinion, Daniel also is talking specifically about the things that were going to happen when Christ would come in the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire would be set up because they talk about the four kingdoms, the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, and Greeks and Roman Empire. Daniel talks specifically about that. And then I think also that carries over to Revelation. It's my opinion, if you lay down the book of Daniel, the book of Matthew chapter 24, and the book of Revelation, and study those in tandem, you can get a little bit better flow of what's going on.
So how long was it between the book of Isaiah and the book of Revelation?
Well, it depends on when we say Revelation was written.
Jeremiah, I said Isaiah, I meant
Jeremiah? Jeremiah was a prophet when?
Old Testament.
Old Testament. But not in the 500s, Brother Clunch. But Jeremiah in the 500s. A little bit earlier. Brother Clunch is going to look it up. I don't recall right offhand. 625 BC. So.
I think we should see the prediction in Jeremiah and Revelation. What's the difference in years?
Well, if we round it off, 625 and just round it off to 100, that'd be 725 years. It's a long time. Could not be done on a guess. But Jeremiah 51:7 says, Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, and therefore the nations are mad. Questions, comments?
I think here Jeremiah, he's talking about physical death. Captain's part, they're going to go away, and Babylon's responsible for it. So they're the reigning people at the time. Whereas you move to the spiritual, you get, so he draws off the figure of what's being said in Jeremiah.
Right. The reason I went back there though was to show the drinking in the cups and tying it all together. Verse 7 says, And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? And like Brother Clunt said, when it gets back up to the close of verse 6, where it says, I wondered with great admiration, there are other versions of the Bible that wondered with wonder and a few other things other than admiration, which I think would be better. But the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? Now I take this to be that the angel is sort of puzzled that John's reflecting on that, because the angel had already told John, come go with me, I'm going to show you what's going on. I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. So in this verse, the beast was not, yet is. So that means that somewhere along the line, the power of that beast diminished and then it came back. When we get to not written in the book of life and the foundation of the world, or the foundation of the earth, if we go back to Exodus 32:32, it doesn't use book of life, but it uses the reference. Moses has come back to plead the Israelites had messed up, and Moses goes before God and says, if you'll forgive them their iniquity, you can blot my name out of the book. And then the following verse says that he wouldn't do that, that he blots out of the book those that have transgressed. So what book could he possibly be talking about if it's not the book of life? Which I believe it is. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sat. Some people want to narrow this down and make it be Rome because Rome had 7 hills. But in the Bible, many times, mountains are referred to as power or things great. Same way with crowns. So I'm looking at it in that direction. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. Again, there are many people that want to try to nail this down to be in Rome, and they will go through all kinds of contortions, but it depends on where you start as to what, if you're dealing with the Roman Empire, where you start depends on where you wind up. And if you list them, there is no combination of ways that you can come up with what some of them believe, and that is Domitian as being the 8th. There's just too many of them before Domitian. When you get down to the other part, you start looking at them, and they want to start with Pompey because he's the one that really formed the Roman Empire, even though he was not a Caesar. You get down to Julius, and some of them want to skip him and start with Augustus. Well, if you do that, then you come down to here, but then they want to skip Otho, Galbo, and Vitellius because they only served for less than 2 years, the 3 of them combined. So if we're in a book of symbols and we understand that this is including more than one location at one time, then we can pick up with a different look at it. And 7 is really just a perfect number, and 10 is sort of a number of multitudes. I have even read one where it wants it to be the beast that was, and then went away for a while, and then is coming back, was the Roman Catholic Church, the way the papacy went. And there have been times in their history where only by luck did they manage to survive. One incident where they had armies from other countries come in with the sword to help defend them, they would have gone out of existence. But I look at the harlot as being the church in apostasy, and that doesn't rest solely with the Catholic Church. It's a good example because of all the things that they do and teach that are wrong. But when we come to the Reformation movement, how many churches out of the Reformation movement can we count as apostate churches that teach error? One of the first ones, Luther. Is Luther the Lutheran Church, does it teach just the Bible? What about the Baptists? What about the Methodists? What about Jehovah's Witness? Came on later. What about the Quakers? What about? And you can go on and on and on about what's going on.
Isn't it similar from the term that they didn't want to change, to get rid of the Catholic Church, they just wanted to reform what they thought was wrong, they wanted to keep it.
Yeah, Luther only wanted to reform what parts of it and didn't want it named after him, but you see what they got. Now, how does these churches operate? And a lot of times it's in conjunction with government, especially the Catholic Church, because they have a lot of power. And we've been talking about not only the apostate church and false teaching and false doctrine, we've also been talking about government influence getting worse and worse. And a good example is just yesterday. Well, let me back up and ask the question this way. Other than cabinet post, senators, congressmen, chief of staff, executive branch, can you name one person that works at the White House that has had their name plastered on the TV when they were hired for a job at the White House? They just hire them going about their business, right? But yesterday, they made it a point to come out and stick their thumb in the eye of Christians by announcing that we have hired our first transsexual. If they wanted to hire a transsexual, fine. Why did they have to make more over that than they did anyone else they hired? Only for what reason?
I think all of this goes to the word desensitized so that it's accepted. The longer you talk about it, the longer you put it in a favorable view, atmosphere, the greater the acceptance is.
Okay. I'm going to change your wording just a little bit. We already have to accept it. It's there. I accept people for who they are. What they're wanting to do is desensitize us to the point where we move away from the Bible and approve. Now, there's a vast difference between the word accept and approve. And that's one reason when John Kasich answered a question in the debate that I decided I wouldn't vote for him. He was asked if one of your daughters was come to you and was homosexual, what would you tell her? And he said, well, it's my daughter. I would accept it. I'd love it. And went on about his business. Okay? Wrong answer. If my son or daughter came to me and they were homosexual, I would accept them as a homosexual. I would love them, but I would have to stand by the Bible. I would not approve of their actions, and I would teach them what the Bible says. That's the difference. But he said, well, it's the law of the land, so he just went on. He just skirted the issue, trying not to offend anyone.
I thought he didn't bring up the Bible, did he? I thought he said, since God loves us.
He did, yes, sir. But he didn't quote all of it, did he? And that's what so many people do that teach falsely. They will teach part, but not the whole. And I was always taught when I was growing up that half a truth is a whole lie. John Kasich, half a truth is a whole lie. If you tell something and omit part of it that changes the tenor of what's been said, then you have not been totally honest. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. We can see this prophecy back in Daniel chapter 2, verse 44 through 45, where he's talking about one will come. Well, let's just go there. Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2, 44 and 45. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron and the brass, the clay, the silver, the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. So Daniel is already prophesying back here of Christ coming and setting up a kingdom that will not ever be destroyed. And if we go into Revelation chapter 19 and verse 16, there it's talking about, and he hath on his vesture and on his thighs a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So that theme's going to carry on for the rest of the book too. Verse 15, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Earlier, she was riding on the beast with the 10 horns. She was getting along with the beast. What happened?
And overcame it. It was disappointing in what was taking place.
Okay. Also, if we want to look at it slightly different and then get to that point where the Lamb wins out, is people who, particularly the ones that do bad things, more evil things, that works more that way than it does with good folks. They have a tendency to use each other until they've got everything they can get from them, and then they turn on them. Is that not true? So the beast and the harlot were using each other and getting along fine, wreaking havoc, and then they fell out of favor with one another, and the beast turns on them. Verse 16, and the 10 horns which thou sawest, and these shall hate the whore, shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Okay. When are God's words going to be fulfilled? Pardon?
Here would be the end of time. Yeah.
We're speaking of the end of time. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So again, this is why I say that the harlot here is the apostate church, because it's not just a kingdom we're talking about, because in verse 15 it's talking about the waters being the multitude of people, tongues, and nations. When we get to verse 18, she's compared to the great city, and she reigneth over the kings of the earth. How does a harlot reign over the kings of the earth? Should be an easy answer.
Prove it said they'd all been made drunk by her wine, and so she still has the influence and control of it.
She has influence and control, and what is more controlling than someone, saw this on TV today where there's, let's see if I can remember it. I've only seen it a time or two. Some website on some website people had been going to, and somebody hacked it and put out names of people that had signed up where they were in illicit relationships. Ashley Madison, there you go, Ashley Madison website had been hacked. And so whoever it was that hacked it said, shut down or I will release this information. How many marriages, how many lives are going to be wrecked when that happens? Because 44 of them, they said this on TV today, 44 of them came from the White House. Over 1,000 of them were military addresses.
What was it, something like 3 million?
I don't know I don't know the exact, like I say, I've only seen it once or twice, and then today it was talking about the ones out of the White House.
Didn't they also emphasize how dumb somebody must have been to get involved in that website and allow their name and things to be associated with it?
Yes, sir, but how often are people who do something like that rational? How often do they think things out, think it all the way through?
I think Solomon talked about that. He was talking to his son, he walked down the street, he smelled the sweet perfume and the sexuality of women and the smooth, flattering speech that they have. He said, don't be enticed by it. How many people do get enticed by it?
Heard one on TV today on one of the talk shows say, it is hard, asked a question of one of them and said, didn't you say that it was hard to be monogamous? What's so difficult about being monogamous? That's the world we live in.
The difficulty comes when you follow that website and adhere to it and get found out. That's the hard part.
It doesn't have to do with that, but there's no doubt General Petraeus was a very, very intelligent individual. And he allowed the very same situation. He brought on all of this sensitive information. So his mission is to have Florida.
Well, again, that sort of shows you the imbalance there. Petraeus brought it home, had it in a locked desk drawer, but yet was found guilty and classified material. And I won't go any farther than that. I don't have the time to expound on it. Thank y'all.